Welcome to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. I'm your host, Johnny Mango. This is the place where we inquire about lifestyle, culture, and careers. Weekly, we meet with new guests that make a contribution of their insightful stories about their careers and how those careers impact their lifestyle and culture. Hello, everyone out there. This is Johnny Mango, and today we're here to talk about something that's really important. Emergency service workers experience a lot of trauma, and we're all thankful for what they do, but at the same time, it's got to be a tough life. And we have somebody on today who has taken their life from being a flight nurse, actually, to becoming an artist. And I think it's a good lesson for a lot of people who maybe want to change careers or look at something different. And so let's all welcome Cheri Carandanis. Hello, Cheri.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So, Cheri, tell us about your background. Tell us how you got here today.
Sure. So I started off as a nurse. I went to college and got my nursing degree and started off as a nurse in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And after about a year of just getting my feet wet in the world of nursing, I just had this inkling in me that I couldn't do the same thing every day, waking up to the same job, the same people. And I had grown up as an Air Force brat. My father was in the Air Force for 26 years. I found myself at the Air Force recruiter's office. And I signed up to be a nurse in the Air Force. So I joined the Air Force and was trained in the ICU. And then they had a special program called CCAT, which was Critical Care Air Transport Teams. And so what those teams are trained to do are in wartime situations, we would have a intensivist doctor, a critical care nurse, and a respiratory therapist. As a team, we would be able to set up little mobile mini ICUs in any opportune aircraft. So this is kind of a wartime situation where we could bring higher levels of care closer to the front lines with the goal of saving more lives. So I was trained in that, and then September 11th happened. So then there was the opportunity for this program to actually go live in a wartime situation. And so I was deployed after 9/11 to Afghanistan. And it was the honor of my life to be able to do that. But on returning, my husband and I wanted to start a family. And I just saw way too many of my friends having to leave their babies for deployment. And it was just heartbreaking. So I made the decision after 6 years of active duty to separate from the military. And then I did some more ICU work as a civilian, and my husband and I wanted to move to Portland, Oregon, because we did have our first son at that point, and be near family, because he's from a big fat Greek family. So we wanted to be around family. So we moved up here to Portland, and I started sensing that I was getting a little burnt out of the ICU scene, the high adrenaline. So long story short, I found myself in hospice, and I never thought I would do hospice work. But I'm so glad I did. I did it for about 15 years, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful part of nursing that I didn't really consider before. And so being able to sit with people during that time of transition and with their families, really sacred. And it was an honor for me to serve in that capacity too. So I did that and got my master's degree in nursing leadership, and I actually got to become the nurse manager of hospice nurses. And so that was kind of a different role, but I loved taking care of the carers. It was just something that I valued so much, and just making sure they had everything they need so that they could go out and do that work, that sacred work. So I did that. And then, I really wanted to be home with the boys. We have 2 boys, as much as I could. So I was really creative with my nursing jobs, and I found myself in parish nursing, and it was a lot of fun just trying to protect that time with family. But then in 2019, my world just came crashing down. I had 2 brain injuries, 19, and it eventually just made me retire my nursing license. I couldn't get to the place cognitively where I felt safe to practice nursing. My mind wasn't working the way it had. And so it was really devastating for me to have to give up my nursing license and not be a nurse anymore. But in that, I found myself in brain rehab and that whole world that I knew nothing about. I thought I did as a nurse and as a healthcare provider, but as a patient, I had no idea. I had no idea. And so I was doing the rehab work, and for me, my injury was mostly on the left side of my brain, which is where I very happily lived for most of my life. And so the doctors were telling me I had to fire up that right side, which I learned meant creativity and presence and intuition and mindfulness and things that I wasn't really familiar with. I liked my science-y brain, but that just wasn't working as well. I decided that one of the doctors recommended I get a coloring book and just color and see what that does. Does that help? Does it fire anything up? And so I did, and it was like my whole body repelled that whole experience. I hated the coloring book. And so I let that go. But I was watching YouTube one day and I saw a woman painting on a large canvas, and she was painting abstract. And it's like I immediately understood that she was painting her feelings. And for some reason that appealed to me. And I knew I had a lot of feelings. I was really struggling with my identity shift, the loss of my identity as I knew it. I was in depression and anxiety, and it was just like this runaway train that was just getting away from me. And I found that I did get a big piece of cardboard and some of my kids' tempera paints from school, and I just started painting big. And my body said yes. My body said, this is what you need to be doing right now. And the more I did it, the more I realized I love this. I don't know why I love it, and it doesn't look great, but I don't care. It just feels right for my body. And so I continued. I just kept painting and painting and painting. And over time, friends and family started to say that you're getting better. You're getting good. Some of your paintings are really good. Maybe you should sell some. And I thought, that is absurd. No one will buy this because it's my therapy. It's literally just what's keeping me alive right now. No one's going to be interested in buying that. But over time, I realized that, yes, that's exactly what people want to buy. People want real. They just want authentic in their life, and especially in art. They don't always look for pretty art. They just want something that speaks to them. And I think because I was painting my feelings and because I was being honest with the art, I think that's what connects people to my art. And so now I am a business owner. I own Carandanis Fine Art, and it's been a ride. It has been a ride. And so I can't thank my brain injury enough. For so many years, I hated it. I resented it. I was so bitter. But today, I can be grateful for it because it's really opened me up to who I truly am and not who I think society wants me to be or, what the expectations that were put on me. I was able to be born into myself. But it took time to grieve. I had to grieve myself while being alive. And so that was a difficult part. But once I kind of worked through that, I can be in this place now where I can be really appreciative of that trauma.
What a wonderful story.
Thank you.
That is amazing. And I am so hopeful that this is inspiration for other people that listen in, because so many people make transitions for various reasons.
Yes.
They don't like their boss.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you experienced an injury.
Yes.
There's all kinds of different reasons and things behind that. Well, let's talk about your story a little bit. Okay, can we back up to when you were flying around saving lives? You may not want to talk about it, but
it's fine. It's fine. I'm happy to talk about it.
What was it like? I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you faced a lot of trauma in patients, especially during a war. I would think
Yes.
that is there any way to explain the experience of that?
What I learned after that experience, and years later, I found myself in therapy because at the time I thought, I compartmentalized it. I put it away in a tidy little box. But years later, when I did have to have some counseling around it, I was introduced to the term vicarious trauma. And it's what first responders often are exposed to is this vicarious trauma. And many people that find themselves in this field are also empaths. We take on and are very sensitive to the energy around us and to, what people are experiencing. That trauma that people were experiencing as a wounded soldier, a wounded airman, is real. And as a person that's trying to take care of them and my goal was always just do whatever we can to get them home. There's people waiting for them. They've got to get home. And, we didn't always succeed. But that was our goal, was to get these, men and women home. And that trauma, it leaves a mark. It leaves a mark. But I think that the way I handled it wasn't the best way, by just packing it away. And it's not just at wartime. It's in the ICUs, it's in the ERs, it's in hospice work. People are being traumatized by their illnesses and by their injuries. And so as caregivers, we do take that on, but we have to process that. We have to have a way to let that kind of enter us and then leave us. And I didn't really have a way of doing that. I just kind of ignored it.
Yeah. I years ago, I had the occasion to work with an ER doc,
Mm.
unrelated to the medical world, but I was doing some other work with him. And what really struck me, he was young. He was in his 40s, and he'd been an ER doc since he got out of his residency or whatever. That's what he wanted to be and where he was at.
Mm.
And he made a comment to me. He says, Johnny, he says, I'm going to have to start thinking about retirement soon. And I said, why? I said, you're not even 50.
Yeah.
He says, because ER docs don't make it past 50
Mm.
because of the decisions and the stress that we're under.
Yes.
He says you have no idea the life and death decisions that take place in an emergency room, because so many patients, and you probably experience this too, so many patients are unconscious that you can't ask them anything. You can't ask them what kind of meds they're on or what got them there and all that kind of thing. So I never thought about it before until he explained it to me. And that must just increase. I'm thinking about your situation. That must just increase the stress on somebody who's doing this. I can't even imagine if you go to a car accident even and people are unconscious and here's these first responders trying to figure out what to do and what part of your body is injured. You have a spinal injury, neck injury, or did you have a heart attack, whatever. You know, it's got to be just unbearable. I haven't heard of the term vicarious trauma. Can you get into that just briefly, what that is?
Yeah, I think it's when a person experiences trauma through another person's trauma. So that can happen in many ways, but for me, it was through patients. And, because, when you're a healthcare provider or a carer, you are so intimate in that person's space. Like they're needing help and you can potentially offer them some help. And it's just this intimate or interaction, very sacred, very scary interaction. And so a lot of that energy, and I'm a big believer in just our energetic environment. And so that energy is shared. And so just because that person moves on from their trauma and however they're going to deal with it, the person that is the first responder, the healthcare provider, we're left with that too. It's in our bodies too. That energy left their mark in our bodies too. And so it's not that I experienced, injuries from that car accident or from that, gunshot wound, but because my patient did, I experienced it through them. And so it leaves a lot of the same marks.
So it's kind of a form, what I'm hearing you say, it's kind of a form of energy transference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
For sure.
I just finished the whole series on energy and spiritual energy, physical energy. In fact, I spoke with someone last week about what he studied what's called vibe for the last 30 years.
Mm.
And he has his doctorate in communication, but he's always been fascinated with this vibe thing, how these energy sources, and he started going out to rave dances and things like that, where they talked about the vibe.
Yes.
But everybody I talked to along the spiritual plane, and I've talked to a number of different people in the past couple months about this, and here you are popping up talking about this energy. Okay, I wanted to talk about how you got from flying around saving people to being an artist, but now we're into the energy thing for a second.
Love it. Love it.
So this vicarious trauma is really kind of what I'm hearing you say is an energy transference, that
Yes.
you pick up those feelings or that something from somebody when you're standing over them trying to save their
Yes.
life or working on them or whatever.
Yes.
And so, yes, if you compartmentize that, you're going to get loaded with everybody else's energy.
That's right. That's right. And that's not sustainable. Your body will rebel over time. For a while, it'll work. For a
Yeah.
while, you'll make yourself believe that that's just how you deal with it,
Right.
and, as a team. And, you mentioned earlier that it must have been so stressful to make these decisions, especially for people who, aren't conscious, and what we rely on as medical people is our training. And what I relied on, not only in my training, but in my team. And so we just knew that we were going to make the best decision with the information that we had in the moment. And so, yeah, I even had really great teams where we would debrief after something traumatic happening in our unit. And, you talk about it, you debrief it, what could we do better, what went well, things like that. But it didn't really touch on vicarious trauma ever. It was just something like everybody just pulls themselves up by their bootstraps and just moves forward. Next patient, This came for me years later, decades later, where my body just said, in the form of anxiety. I was not never an anxious person. I obviously loved to fly in aircraft.
Yeah.
And one day I got onto a commercial flight and I thought I was dying. I thought I had a pulmonary embolism. I don't know what. And so I ended up in the emergency room. They said, Cheri, you had a panic attack. And I thought, nope, that's not me. I don't have panic attacks. I don't get scared of things. But that was my body's way of saying, slow your roll. You need to deal with some stuff. And so that began a very long journey of processing all of that.
I once had a panic attack on an airplane, and it's only happened to me once or twice in my life and many years ago, but I almost went up and knocked on the cockpit door saying,
yes,
you gotta land this plane now.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful. The flight hadn't taken off yet, but it had taxied to go take off. And I stood up and told the flight attendant, you got to turn this thing around. I am not staying on this plane. I think I'm dying. And they turned it around. And
did they really?
Wow. Oh, yeah. Because I said, I'm a nurse. I'm dying. I feel like I'm dying.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about, before we get off the energy thing, I do have one other question about when you're in hospice. When you said you're in hospice a number of years.
Yes.
Did you still feel that? I mean, that's less traumatic. That's more kind of like saying goodbye and keeping people comfortable, basically. But that's what I know about hospice. That's about all I know about hospice. But where was the energy in that situation? How would you describe the distinction?
Like you said, in hospice, people are aware of what's happening, but every patient and every family member is different. And so sometimes it was the family members that were traumatized and didn't know how to process that. And so we were there to help them process the news and how to say goodbye, to their loved one. And so it was like a calmer trauma, I guess, that we dealt with. But the difference for me was in hospice work, we talk about these energies. We talk about vicarious trauma. We process that together as a hospice team. And so it was just a lot more awareness around the effect of that very important work on us as caregivers.
Yeah.
And so I just felt a lot more supported, and there were words put to how I was feeling. And so just from that side of it, the team was just a lot more aware. And we had chaplains and spiritual care counselors, and we had, beautiful from all faiths and all backgrounds. And I remember one time we had a Buddhist priestess that was on staff, and she was just so healing for us because we would have a difficult situation and we would all gather and she would just help us process. And so it was just a whole different world of medicine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was very, very lucky to be a part of a team that was so aware.
And I would imagine it's a different pace too, because
Yes.
in EMS work, the bell rings and off you go.
Yes.
Running
Yes.
into something you don't know what you're going to run into. Is you got to
Right.
think fast, and
Yep. Yep.
Whereas in hospice, you know what the objective is.
Right.
There's
And
an
we're not doing
objective.
anything to prolong life.
Yeah.
We're not hastening death, but we're not prolonging life either.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is a slower pace, but it's much deeper because you have the time, right? You have the time to develop these relationships with
Yeah.
patients and their families. And so
did
it's much deeper.
One last question on energy, and we're going to get into the art.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever, when people actually died, did you ever notice an energy change in them? I mean,
100% of the time.
other than their heart stops beating, but you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I always think of it as like when our souls and spirits are in our bodies, it's like a hand in a glove. Like it animates that glove. It makes that glove move, right?
Yeah.
But when the spirit and soul leaves the body, it's just the glove. And there's just no animation. There's no energy. There
Yeah.
just isn't any like connection there anymore. It's like a glove. It's just laying there.
I interviewed a Catholic priest about a month and a half ago that has over 500 times connected with spirits who have died he says mostly suddenly, who get lost along their way. And his job has been to help them make some type of transition.
Wow.
It's a very interesting podcast.
Wow, yeah.
And I had no idea that anybody in the Catholic Church would do that. He's been doing it for years. Anyway,
That's
okay,
incredible.
let's talk about art. Let's talk about
That's going to be about energy too.
I know. Okay, well, I'm going to change my name to Energy Johnny by the time I get in with all you guys. What in the transition? You explained the transition that you had a physical ailment that caused you to do this, and at what point? And you talked about how, you sound like you set up a little studio and you would just paint, and whatever was inside you was coming onto the canvas somehow. Okay. But then how did you transition to this becoming more of a business?
There was so much work involved in just changing my mindset too, because I judged myself. When I would see what I was painting, I was like, oh, that's a piece of crap. This is, ugly, but whatever, it made me feel better. So it wasn't for anyone else. But then when people started to comment that they were really liking what I was painting, I had to deal with that too. Like, then I became performative. Like, okay, well, now every painting needs to be something that people like, which was a huge it became a huge departure from my real art, my honest art. I started to paint what I thought people would like. And so it lost its magic for me, and it lost its magic on the canvas. And so I had to really do a lot of work into what is honest for me, what is truly the muse that is trying to get me, what is that magic sauce? So after doing a lot of that, I started to get more grounded in what was true for me and what was honest. And so the thing that happened was my father and my mom, they live here in the neighborhood, and my dad was kind of on the bandwagon of, you should start a business. You should sell your art.
Typical parent.
Yes. He's like, you need to, this brain injury just wrecked your life. You need something to focus on. You need a distraction.
That's the kind of stuff I would say.
Yeah. He's a good dad. He's like, trying to push me because, he saw me in brain injury for so long and it just was so different from the daughter he knew. And so we talked about it. And then he said, well, what do you need? What do you need to become like a professional artist? I said, well, I probably need a little training, but I need a studio because I was just kind of painting wherever there was space, like kitchen table or, wherever.
Yeah.
And because there were such big paintings, that was not really conducive to keeping a clean house because there was paint everywhere. And so he said, okay, let's build out a studio for you. So he came over. My husband was kind enough to give up his office and my dad built out a beautiful studio for me. It's small, but it's everything I need. A huge easel. He hung the lights. He did everything. And so he goes, okay, now what? And I said, well, I guess I have to learn how to start a business. I don't know. I got to get on YouTube and figure this out. And so he went on. So he did that in September 2023. We spent a whole week building my studio and it was so much fun. We had a lot of fun. We joked a lot. I always thought it was funny because he would comment on my art and he literally was colorblind. I was like, Dad, you're colorblind. You don't even know what you're talking about. And so we had a great time. That weekend, him and my mom left on an RV trip because he loves fishing. He loved it. And so they went fishing on the Washington coast. And this story takes a very tragic turn. He died fishing. He was taken by a sneaker wave and he was out on a jetty. And so the trauma of losing my father like that, just, Sunday night we were texting and I was texting him some potential logo ideas for the new business. And, he was thumbs up and that looks great. And, and then Monday he's gone. And it devastated me. But after about a month and a half of just reeling in our grief over the loss of my father, I just heard him in my heart saying, get off your ass and go do this thing. Stop waiting. It's time. It's time for you to do this. And I think I needed a distraction so badly. I needed something to work on and focus on so badly that I just didn't ask any more questions. I threw myself into it and started a business. Like it was, and I look back on it and I'm amazed at what I did because I built a website. I started a business account. I got a business license and, all these things that I put off for so long because I just didn't think I could figure it out. And all of a sudden I was just figuring it out and doing it one step at a time. And so the death of my father, I think, was the catalyst that threw me into, let's do this. Life is so short. I don't want to regret anything.
Life is short, isn't it? Really
it
is.
So short. It is.
And the older we get, the shorter it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we never know, what's going to happen, obviously.
Right.
So I just, yeah.
So what role does intuition play in the painting process?
Huge, especially for the painting that I do because it's intuitive. It's intuitive painting. That's what it's called. I don't know when I approach a blank canvas, I have no idea what it's going to look like in the end. I have no idea. I just approach the canvas and I just start following my intuition. And that's so easy to say, like, oh, I follow my intuition. But what I had to do was get to know my intuition. It's a relationship. I never looked at it that way before because I never really leaned into creativity and never really had to rely on my intuition. But in developing a relationship with my intuition and trusting that it knows what the next step is. It knows what the next mark is. It knows what the next color is. Not only that, it also knows the next step in my life, the decisions I make. There's this presence inside of me, my intuition that's at the center of me that has known these things all along. I just never listened to it and I never gave it permission to really speak because I just went with what I cognitively understood and intellectually understood to guide my life, and by always giving into expectations of what was expected of me. And so my intuition has changed my entire way of being and my entire way of seeing the world and how I move in it. But with my art, it is responsible for every brushstroke, for every mark I make. When I start to depart from my intuition, it never ends good.
Really?
It's just never lands. It doesn't land right on the canvas. But when I'm honest, if I'm upset that day, if I'm grieving that day, or if I'm just elated with joy that day, it has to be honest and come out on the canvas. It just has to.
So help me here. How can someone with no art background, as an
Mm-hmm.
example,
Mm-hmm.
how can somebody use creativity
Mm-hmm.
for emotional healing? Someone who doesn't see themselves as an artist, you didn't see yourself as an
No,
artist,
no.
and it may not, and I'm not saying just as an artist that paints, but
Right.
as a storyteller, as a
Yes.
musician, as there's all kinds of
Yes.
artistic endeavors out there. How does one with no background in that
Mm-hmm.
step into that as a healing process?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is we need to lay down all judgment of ourselves. Like you just have to put that aside. You can't start creating, whether it's through writing or singing or painting or dancing. You can't do any of that for performance. You can't start it thinking, I got to get good at this so that people will appreciate it and like it. It has to come from a place where you literally do it for yourself and no one sees it. You just, for me, making a mark on a page, if I was angry, I scribbled. It looked like a toddler got to some crayons and just went to town on a piece of paper. But that's what was true for me in that moment. And so for anyone that writes, just writing what's true and not judging themselves on grammar or composition or, that. Just letting themselves go into kind of a stream of consciousness, which we don't do anymore. We don't meditate. We don't take time to just be still and quiet because of all the bombarding distractions in our world. I had to start to meditate before I created because I had to calm my mind down, calm my spirit down, and get to a place where I could intuitively create something. And that had to start for just me. And when we get to that place where we can let that flow come out of us, that's where the healing happens. That's where healing happens in our body. It's that energetic flow that's, I believe, is from the divine. It's a divine flow that comes from us because the paintings that I do, the work that lands on the canvases, it's not something that Cheri Carandanis thought of. It's from the divine. I'm just the vessel. I'm just the conduit. I'm just the water faucet that lets the water flow through me. And when we allow that divine energy, it heals us on every level of our being, physically, mentally, spiritually, psychologically. It's magic. It's magic. And I would have never said those words before in my life. I would have thought, you are really woo and you are really kind of out there. But because I've had to experience it, because it's the only way that I was able to get through my brain injury and what I lost, man, I am a champion for it. If people could, and it takes minutes, literally, it's not this slog to get there. It's literally being intentional with calming down, quieting ourselves, and just starting, making a mark, writing a word, writing a sentence, singing a line, dancing a dance. It's just starting. And then if you just let go of the judgment in our heads, if we just let go of that, the flow will come.
So lastly, before we have to go, the other big question I have for you is, what's the one message you hope that your story and your art leaves with others that are struggling? What's the one message you'd like to share with listeners about that?
That we're never alone. We're never alone. We're created for connection. And I hope that through my art, I can connect with people on a level that I could never connect with them, maybe through my words or even through just standing in front of them, even just for them to be able to look at art in a way that's connecting. And also through my story, which always goes along with my art, is that healing is possible. And it might be very slow and it might feel like it's never going to happen, but that healing is possible. And that if we just create the right environment for our bodies and our minds, that it's inevitable. Healing is inevitable, and it probably won't look the way we think it will if we imagine healing. Like if I imagined healing but after my brain injury, I would think, okay, I'm going to be back to where I was. That's what healing is, 100% back to where I was. Well, I couldn't be more different. I mean, my
Right.
life couldn't look more different. But it's healing, and I'm so much happier, so much happier. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. So how does somebody find you? If somebody has an interest in your art, how do they find you?
So I have a website. It's Carandanis Fine Art.
Let's spell that out for everybody.
Sure. It's CARAN as in Nancy, DANIS, and then fineart.com. And then I'm really active on Instagram and Facebook. And so my handles on there are exactly the same, Carandanis Fine Art. So you can find me on there. And I'm really active. I love connecting with people on that platform. But also on my website, there will be a spot to sign up for my newsletter. And so I'm always sharing things on my newsletter too with my art journey.
Very good. Cheri, I certainly appreciate your time and your insight today.
Thank you, Johnny.
I think it's been very meaningful, and I hope I got something out of it. I hope others get something out of it too, because I'm starting to learn at a very unique age. There's more to life than just our physicality.
That is so true. And it's so much better when we can lean into that and finally get it. Like it took me a while too, but I'm so glad I get it now.
Yeah. What I'm learning is a lot of people can still do what they do and kind of tap into that intuitive element that's there, that intuitive energy, and it boosts
Yes.
whatever they're doing up to another
That's right.
level.
That's right.
So,
That's right. It becomes like D and in HD, like everything just gets more intensified.
Well, Cheri, thank you so much, and
Thank you.
really appreciate it, and good luck with the art.
Thank you so much. I really had a lot of fun.
All right. You take care. You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. Subscribe to hear a new and unique guest each week as they comment on their life's journey and share experiences with lifestyle, culture, and career. You can always find us at minuteswithmango.com.